going? What do you say? All right, so we are at chapter 17. So let's say a prayer, and we have lots of treats tonight, so please eat them. So, so Lord, we turn to you this evening in thanks and thanksgiving that we might be able to spend some time with you and with your word and with all that you've brought us, and that in it we may see your love for us, and we may see your wisdom, and not just in the text, but in being lived out in our lives and in the ways that you seek to tend us. In all this, oh God, let us see and know your love by those of us who are gathered around this table. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Oh yeah, sorry. It was turn it off. It was really stuffy when we first opened the door.
Yeah.
That's why we turned it on.
Okay. Yep. It's just
No,
with it's like the perfect frequency for my hearing aids. So
that
like,
is so good.
I don't want the cheese, I just like the breakfast. Just give me the carbs.
so we
What is this?
are. So we.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we are in chapter 17. Just as the reminder, so Paul and Barnabas broke up the band. They went in different directions. Paul has now gone on. This is what's called his second missionary journey. He is now. He went into Turkey. He had the big dream with the Macedonians, that the suffering Macedonian man. He had to come back, and so they head off to Macedonia to start to minister to the Greeks. They started out in Philippi, which is kind of Philippi is kind of the edge of the Roman world. So now tonight they head down into Greece proper. And so they're really getting away from the Roman influence more, and they're getting away from places where there are a lot of synagogues. So we're seeing, we've been talking about the kind of the way Paul's plan. He goes into town, he goes to the synagogue, he preaches. The people and around the synagogue is also the God-fearers. Remember the pagan Greeks that are kind of friendly to the Hebrew idea, and so they're kind of already primed for the good news about Jesus. And so that whole modality is starting to shift now. As he heads down into Greece, it's like that little plan is gonna work kind of less and less because he's now going into it's not a Roman world. It's really a purely pagan world of the Greeks. So any questions about where we've been, what we're doing, what came up there?
So Greece was not under the Roman Empire's control?
Yeah, I think it's but I think it's like the first century, late in the first century, second century, that Greece actually becomes a full Roman protectorate. And so there's Philippi is, and then they're kind of at the edge, I think, some of that, but Greece proper, although there's plenty of interchange, we'll see Paul go to Athens tonight, and that's a really big deal. It's a big deal in the sense of, so Athens is still a big deal, even the Romans would want to go to Athens to be educated. So like you would, it's like, and any particularly, and even whether wherever you were in the empire, you could be from, the way you got credentialed was kind of like the going to Harvard sort of thing. I grew up in, Bump-ass, Virginia, which is an actual place, by the way.
I was going to say, potty mouth over there.
Yeah, it's a real place. They call it Bumpus, but whatever.
There's a cut and shoot Texas.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, they have a cut and shoot.
Yeah. So you could be from there, but if you present, if you go to Harvard, you have some credentials, and that was kind of Athens was that way. Like if you went through the philosopher schools of Athens, but the Romans are very much imitating and very much leaning on the philosophies and the thought of the Greeks.
But are they part of the Roman Empire?
No, I don't think so. At this point, I do
Before.
not think they are. I mean, being a part of the empire is kind of a, you know, they're bound to the empire. But I don't think it's until like the later second century that they actually are overcome by, you know, by the Romans proper. Although, you know, we still see them having kind of Roman judiciary. We'll see that in this as well. So
So right now, they're still operating on their own, like, states, right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
Spartans and,
yeah. They're right. So you know, this is why I wish this is the thing Wayne would know. Yeah, they're still, but again, everybody, you know, Rome is so big and it's such an economic force that it definitely has influence and that sort of stuff. But what's happened at this point is most of the other states have kind of, particularly because of the Peloponnesian Wars and all that, they've really diminished in authority. And you know the whole I am Sparta thing and all that. That was a couple hundred years ago. None of the states really have all that much juice anymore, except for kind of Athens. Athens actually has grown in stature over this time, has grown in influence. So, okay. So after Paul and Silas had passed through Amphipolis and Polonia, they came to Thessalonica, and where there was a Jewish synagogue. So, you know, this is one of those things. They're headed along, you know, Amphipolis and Apollonia. So Apollonia, who do you think they worship there? Apollo, right? Amphipolis. So it's kind of a play on one of the Egyptian gods, actually. So there's to play on Anubis. So these are solidly pagan neighborhoods. So they're kind of like, okay, kids, roll up the windows and lock the doors. Like they're just kind of headed through. They're not gonna, you know, Jesus is great, but we're not gonna stake the flag here. And so but they make it to Thessalonica, and there's a Jewish synagogue, so they stopped there. Paul went in and as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days argued with them from the scriptures. So this is 3 weeks. So over 3 Sabbaths, he goes in. Now remember, synagogues weren't like they are today. They don't have a priest. They don't have a rabbi. They were really just a reading group in a way. They would have a kind of a lectionary. They would read through the Torah and the Old Testament scriptures about every 3 years. And so somebody would if somebody would volunteer to read, and then that Sunday, and then they might talk about what they read or something like that. Kind of like this, exactly. And there would be rituals attached to it, because they'd keep the rituals they'd keep Passover, they'd keep the all the rituals of the temple and stuff like that. But they wouldn't. But but they weren't but there wasn't really a kind of professional clergy. So now you get somebody like Paul, who is a Pharisee. So he has been scholarly. He's been trained in the Hebrew Scriptures and has his little bona fides from the temple. He shows up, and this is why it works so well for him, because he's invited. He's like, hey, we got the good guy this week. He's going to be in. He's not just going to That's why he can always go in and be like, and I preached in the temple, because not only is it this kind of expectation that, well, somebody's got to say something, this week, but really that he's bringing some credentials that they wouldn't have, particularly in these smaller towns. So on 3 Sabbath days, so over 3 weeks, he argues with them, and explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Messiah to suffer, to rise from the dead, and saying, "This is the Messiah, Jesus, who I am proclaiming to you." Now some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. So remember what we talked about before about, that the Romans would make fun of this of Christianity as a religion of slaves and women, because this is really the first place this is the first declaration to the world from the divine that says, or from the spiritual tradition that says, you're a full partner in this thing. That you are a valued and beloved child of God in the middle of this, and you'll see, by the way, just as on that note, I meant to mention this before if I didn't, is you'll see them talk about sons of God in here. Sons of God is a title, it's not a gender, okay? It's like saying fisherman, like you can say fisherwoman, but that's not really. We know there are fishermen who are female. We know there are fishermen that are male. It's a title, not a gender. So when the Bible talks about sons of God, it's talking about men and women. So it's talking, and some translations will do that. Some will do sons and daughters. Some will to make that point explicit. But it always meant that. Like that's not a later addition. It's always meant that this is a category of people who are stepping into this. So
It's interesting, in this chapter 17, women are mentioned 4 times.
yeah,
Which is interesting.
right. In incredibly honorable places,
Yeah.
Not like, oh, we had to deal with those women, but like these, they are cornerstones of the church, exactly, and it is, I mean, you can't emphasize how big a deal that is in the world of this,
It's such a contrast from the Old Testament, too.
a contrast from the Old
Contrast
Testament.
from before Jesus was born.
Right.
Women were.
Well, Aristotle believes that women aren't really people.
Yeah.
He said, because the idea was that the male figure was a complete human being, and because women didn't have all the male parts, they tried to be men, but they couldn't quite make it. That they were lesser. They were literally lesser than because they didn't have all the hardware.
It's almost like he could create a human being and
Like
grow
that.
inside him.
That's and that's very pagan. Like that's very pagan. That's very
We
that.
create human beings and
Yeah.
grow them inside us. Like, yes, we're substandard. Like,
Yeah, that's right. You're right. You're handy to have around, but you're not full. Right. You're not full. And
There
again,
was a lot of paganism that said women were great and men were just necessary evil. A lot of the pagans believed.
well, that's I've read all that stuff. And I mean, I think there's actually a lot.
Mother,
Yes, there's
mother
the
something
chalice and the
crone.
blade.
Daughter,
There's-
mother, crone.
Dollar,
That's what it
yes,
was.
yes,
Daughter, mother,
yes.
crone.
There's all of that, and that's, I think there's,
Paganism, I mean.
yeah.
That's all you gotta say.
It's there's, I think in some ways that's a lot of wishful modernity thinking. Because, and I don't think it's fair because in the way of, it doesn't really tell us how bad paganism actually was. What it actually does is dress up
Yeah.
like oh, there were women who had, but they had full power, but they had it in a different realm or in a different way. Like no, it was really just sucked. Like it was just really bad. It was really for everybody. Like if you were a slave, if you did not have the biggest rock able to whack it over the biggest the person's head, it was a culture bound by sheer power and honor. That was it. That's what it was, power over and an honor-based society,
But isn't it interesting, and here we are still today, that to be effective in maintaining your power, it's highly effective if you view others as less than human.
Oh, sure.
Right?
I mean, that's no nation goes to war without first dehumanizing their enemy, that's
We are
the,
still so.
well, we're still, again,
haven't
we're,
come very
well,
far.
well,
And
we're,
we're doing this. Bits and
Yeah.
pieces.
I would contend with it's way better than it was,
Yes.
and that we are
There
still,
he is.
but we are still fighting the same gods.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. We're still fighting
Our
the same
demons.
gods. We're still fighting the publicists are different. Their faces are different,
You
but
got your inhaler?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, all right, you're right. Okay.
Keep going. Don't worry about me. Just catch my breath.
I have my no, I don't.
So,
So they said in here, it says that this was the largest so far of all of Paul's gatherings was here. That he created. And
at Thessaloniki.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the largest of his gatherings. He was able to, the first large draw. He was able
Yeah.
to teach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Audrey, grab a cup, they have
I
water.
have water.
Just get a cup over
Or
there.
you can have some of this.
What,
She's coughing.
do you need water?
You need a cough drop?
There's water in the cupboard, there's water in the jug.
What, I should.
So mine's juice. You want juice or salsa water?
Here, Audrey. I got a cough drop.
I have one too if you want.
Uh-oh.
It's the chocolate you're not eating, that's what's
You don't need it?
Alright,
We got all the
So-
medication you need.
yeah.
So anyway.
So I think that, I mean, I don't know that, but I believe the commentary,
That's
that,
why I love this.
yeah, there's some, I mean, that is the thing about the church in Thessaloniki. It will become, he has 2 letters to the church in Thessalonica. I mean, this becomes a thriving church within the early church. So, so something happens here for sure. And so in Jesus whom I'm proclaiming to you, and some of them were persuaded to join Paul and Silas, as a great many devout Greeks. So again, these are the God-fearers, remember, and not who they were hangers on to the temple, and not a few of them leading women. So just note, when it says leading women, that means they had money. Okay, so these were propertied propertied women. So you invite a guest preacher into your church, and they preach something other than what you expected them to say, and then they walk out the door and they take half of your big givers with them.
Jealous.
What's the reaction, do you think, to the people who are staying in the room? Right. And that's exactly right. So, but the Jews became jealous with the help of some, became jealous. And so it's one thing, but it's one thing to become jealous. It's another thing to actually act on it. So they get fired up because they're starting to lose these Greek God-fearers so they're basically, there's this power and there's this financial aspect that is working on. So now notice this though. What do they care about?
Money.
Power and money, right? Influence and money. So we'll see in a minute that so it's almost as if we're back to the Pharisees asking Jesus trick questions. It's like they don't care. They don't care how many wives did this guy who had 8 wives and 7 of them died, and who's or 7 husbands, and who she married with, and they don't care about that. They're trying to hang Jesus up. And again, it's this what we see in the churches that Paul encounters is there's these 2 differences. There are these places where he encounters people who really genuinely want to know, what is true and what's real, and then there's these places where he encounters people who are like, I don't care what's real, I just want to maintain my power and control and status. And you see very quickly these 2 things begin to work out.
Sorry, guys, check the verse.
Oh yeah, we're on verse 5. Yeah.
Thank you.
So with the help of some ruffians, I don't know who does this translation, but so they recruit some criminals, and in the marketplaces they formed a mob and they set in an uproar. And while they were searching for Paul and Silas to bring them to the assembly, they attacked Jason's house. So they're staying with this guy Jason. So remember, Jason, clearly a Greek. So Jason and the Argonauts, Jason is a completely Greek name. So so they've already converted over this local Gentile Greek guy, and he's invited him to stay in their house. So and his reward for that is he gets his house ransacked. But remember how they're very tricky about this, because remember they can't, the Romans and the authorities still don't really care about and Thessaloniki is still under Roman control. Like they don't care about internal Jewish theological debates. They could care less. But they do care about so that they don't that they don't yeah, but they don't have the power to so the local authorities in the synagogue don't have the power to put these guys to death or even to exile them. Like they don't have any power. So the only way they can actually get something done, and this is what they did with Stephen. And so they're doing kind of the same thing, is they get people riled up. They get a mob going, and so any justice or any kind of thing that they want to get done has to be extrajudicial. Like they can't go through the court system because the court system will say, we don't care. We don't care what you're fighting about, who's the Messiah or not. Like blah blah blah. Like they don't. But they do care. So what they do is they create trouble, and they get people riled up against Paul and Silas, and this is what's happened. So now poor Jason is taking the brunt of it, and in verse 6, when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers and sisters before the city authorities, shouting, "These people have been turning the world upside down and have come here also." So again, remember this has happened already. So it's one of these things where Paul and Silas's reputation is preceding them. They kind of know that this has been going on. So, and Jason has entertained them as guests, and they are all acting contrary to the decrees of the emperor, saying that there is another king named Jesus. So there's a key word here. This idea of calling Jesus king. So the Romans were very big on not calling people kings within their own authority. There was the emperor, there was first consul, they called their rulers a whole bunch of things, but they never called them king. And the reason is that Rome had been founded by a bunch of kings, and they were called, which were affectionately known as the tyrants. And so nobody wants to be called the tyrants. And so even Caesar, even Mark Antony, even all the great leaders of Rome never call themselves king. And so these guys are very clear, like they're saying they're calling somebody else king. So they're calling this who's going to be a tyrant and basically, put a bunch of people against the wall and shoot them kind of thing, which is what, that they're going to, so they know all the nerves to tap here. They're poking all the right sore spots to get something going. And the people, so in verse 8, and the people and the city officials were disturbed when they heard this. And after they had taken bail money from Jason and the others, they let them go. So Jason's a Roman citizen, so he has a right to a trial. So he puts some bail, whether it's money or whatever, collateral, his house, whatever, just kind of the ways the bail system works today. It kind of worked there, and so he's going to now. He's supposed to go up in front of a trial. So again, Paul and Silas can kind of see what's going on here. And so that very night, the brothers and sisters sent Paul and Silas off to Berea. Like, you guys got to get out of here. This is going badly for us. We'll represent ourselves in front of the court when that comes up, but we need you to go to de-escalate the tensions around here. So. So think about this, though. Think about the impact of what this has meant. Paul and Silas are fairly new to town. They may have been here a month, right? Like they're fairly new. They've brought this good news of Jesus with them. This is having this impact on literally on people's hearts and on people's lives. But we're seeing that these aren't just notional ideas that people are having when they encounter the gospel and when they encounter the good news from Paul. They're having transformative experiences. They really are having a reception of the Holy Spirit as we talk about it. Because, James is willing to go to court. Or Jacob, James probably was too. Jason is, he's going to court. He's put up bail. He's the brothers and sisters, rather than saying to Paul and Silas, calling the cops and just saying, Paul and Silas are over here, guys. Like, they're not turning them in. They're going against the authorities of the day. It's smuggling them out of town. That there's this real way that the church has already, just in a month, has had this transformative experience of saying, you know what, this is a new way of living. This is a new way of being together in Christ. So they go and they're off to Berea. Yay, Berea! And when they arrived, they went to the Jewish synagogue. So Berea is a smaller town than Thessaloniki. So Thessaloniki is a pretty good sized town, and these Jews were more receptive than those in Thessalonica. And for they welcomed the message very eagerly and examined the scriptures every day to see whether these things were so. So do you see the difference? So Paul shows up and says, what do they want? What do they do? They examine the scriptures to see if these things are so. They want to know what's true. Is this true? Is this not true? If it's not true, we'll look at the scriptures and we'll see if these 100 whatever prophecies that were over 600 years are in scripture that are pointing to Jesus. We'll see if those are actually don't work out or they do work out. Like we'll figure that out. But we want to know what's true versus the folks that in Thessalonica, they're very much like we don't care what's true. We just want to we just want to be in control, and we want to have all the resources and have all the control. So it's this foundational difference of where their heart is, which is why you see like anywhere you go south of the Mason-Dixon, every third church is Berea Community, whatever, Berea. Like, I mean, it is.
I've never heard of Berea.
You've really never heard of Berea churches? Oh, gosh, yeah.
I was too far south.
Yeah, like, there's a ton of them, man. Like, you go anywhere, there's Berea, Kentucky, but there's Berea, like, all.
What type of churches are they?
What's that?
What type of church?
They tend to be small,
Baptist?
small Baptist-y, non-denominational churches. But, I mean, there's big ones, too. Big ones, small ones, but it's one of the most popular names for Protestant churches in America is in the South is the Berea, and for this reason is that Berea was they really want to name themselves after this idea that Berea was a place that the reception of the gospel happened easily, and that's what they want, So.
Well, what's interesting here is that it seems like this is a very educated group because they're studying and they're questioning, and that's kind of the first time we're hearing of different groups, not just kind of taking it in and believing, but
Right.
they're taking it as an educated approach.
Yeah.
Kind of what you were talking about with Greece being the
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it may be the Greek influence because we'll certainly see when we get to Athens in a couple verses how this is what the Athenians do for fun. Like this is their idea of a good time, and so so even the Jewish Greeks still have this sense of like this idea of learning and this idea of examination, and right, it is, and I think of the other places that we see that is, I mean, you see it with the Ethiopian. The Ethiopian has his own scroll of Isaiah, so he can read his own scroll of it, which is extremely rare and extremely valuable. So there are a few places we see it, but the fact that it should be mentioned, that's a really good point. It probably is. I mean. I can't say with certainty, but it probably is this sense of the way learning is valued in Greece that they're really trying to figure it out.
The NIV version of the Bible describes the Bereans as having more noble character.
Yes,
and
right.
That's like,
right. Yeah. Right.
But that's the same thing. You think about that. The Greeks and questioning and the Sophoclean approach to
right.
things you see it like flavor of life.
So, verse 12, many of them therefore believed, and including not a few Greek women and men of high standing. But instead, nobody, they said, that's great. But when the Jews of Thessaloniki learned that the word of God had been proclaimed by Paul in Berea as well, they came there too, to stir up and incite the crowds. So, they just can't leave it alone, these Thessalonians. So, but why do you think they're they're making such a why did they make such a stink that they would actually follow these guys around?
They don't want change, they like things the way they are.
What, right, they don't want, that's it, but what is it that Paul and Silas are really doing here in terms of,
Starting a movement.
they're starting this is this is dangerous to, that the fact that they're trying to stamp it out in Thessaloniki. So what this can tell us is that the church in Thessaloniki is getting persecuted right now. Like, and this is what Paul's letters will write to be, to encourage them. But because if these guys are going on the road to beat up people in another town, they're beating up the people in their own town to try and stamp this out. They don't want it next door because they want to try and get rid of they want to get rid of Christianity in the entire region.
There's a chance for you to keep spreading.
Exactly.
They can't take root anywhere, especially anywhere close. They can't take root.
Right, exactly. That's right. They're trying to get rid of the weeds. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So they can't let it take root anywhere. So they've got to be even more. It gives you a sense of what the atmosphere is for the church in Thessaloniki and what the atmosphere is for even for Paul and Silas. So
and this is the same as the Pharisees. At the time of Jesus' death, they're acting exactly the same way.
Exactly. It's the same. And for the same reasons. That they want to, they want to be able to keep their rent. They want to keep the rents coming in. They want to be able to keep their status. They like all the lickies and chewies and the fancy pants, and they want to keep that coming in.
I was back to the idea of survival. They're comfortable with the stuff they have.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And they're not going to let anything come in that's going to affect their comfort. Their survival comfort.
Mm-hmm. And right. And remember that the way this is kind of really appealing to the God-fearers, these hangers-on of the Greeks that are around the temple, and the way that those have been really, not just good donors, but that they're really they give the synagogue status, and they give the synagogue protection in a way. Like if you have, if the mayor comes to our church, we may get a few less parking tickets out front. You know what I mean? Like there's this way in which it really, there's a lot of kind of second and third order benefits that if these people actually start following Jesus and leave the synagogue, or even stay in the synagogue but still following Jesus, it puts a lot in question, right? Okay. Many of them therefore believed, including not a few Greek women and men of high standing. But when the Jews learned at Thessaloniki then that the word of God had been proclaimed by Paul and Berea as well, they came there to stir up trouble in the crowds. Then the brothers and sisters immediately sent Paul away to the coast, but Silas and Timothy remained behind. And those who conducted Paul brought him as far as Athens, and after receiving instructions to have Silas and Timothy join him as soon as possible, they left him. So Paul has gone on to Athens, and Silas and Timothy are there trying to encourage the church in Berea. They're teaching. They are remembering. They're like we saw it probably way back now, but it's they're teaching them. They're teaching them this new way to live. This isn't just. These aren't. They're not just sitting down with kind of the idea of how to read properly. They're talking about how to live differently. This notion of this covenantal love that this church, the way the church cares for itself, the way the church cares for the poor, the way that these are different. They actually, these aren't. We think about these communities and we tend to think a little theologically, like, oh, they have a different theology. It's like, what we're really forgetting is that they have a different praxis. They have a different practice. They're going out and they're getting widows off the street and they're saying, let's come get something to eat. They're getting orphans off the street and they're saying, come, we'll raise you. They're acting, and Silas and Timothy stay behind, not to just give them the right theological notions about the Trinity. They're staying behind to say, this is how we live, this is how Jesus calls us to live. This is how Jesus calls us to behave.
They're teaching the pilgrim's path.
Right, yes, they're walking out of
The way, right?
the way, exactly. Like, yeah, before it was called Christianity, it was called the way, exactly. So there's this way of walking out Jesus's path, the pilgrim path that Jesus lays down to operate in this way. So, now Paul's on his own, and he's in Athens, and he's waiting on. So he's kind of waiting in Athens by himself, and
Getting
you know.
pissed off.
You'd think he'd be able to stay out of trouble, but you get a sense of Paul. That what this kind of tells us too is about Paul's growing notoriety. You know, Silas and Timothy, they can fly under the radar. They're not as well known, but we know this guy Paul. Like we know he comes into the synagogue and he starts teaching, and he starts getting into trouble. He starts raising trouble. This is another reason I keep beating this drum, but I still think that way back when he was stoned, that he actually did die or had some radically miraculous healing because of the fact that he's turning into a little bit of a rock star. You know, he's got some cachet here that the others don't, and we can only theorize why that is, but the obvious thing too is he's a loudmouth. Like he goes in and he is not afraid to back down. He's not afraid to step into the
Jesus
scene.
talked to him directly. Jesus came to him and talked to him directly.
Right. Yep.
What the heck are you doing to me there, buddy?
Yeah. Right. And what are you doing to my
Paul was
people?
like stunned, like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, my
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
I think he didn't really believe that, the
Yeah.
resurrection. He didn't believe any of that stuff.
Yeah.
He thought it was all a bunch of lying crap.
Right.
And then Jesus comes and said, "Hey, I'm here.
Right, right.
What are you doing?"
Yep.
And that's the transformation thing. The transformational thing with Paul. Like, wow.
It is.
You know, I am an adult.
It is, and that's Paul's inner journey. But we're starting to see that have its impact in the world. That he's living in this kind of bold way that even some of the other,
And
even
he's
Timothy and
the same
Silas aren't
personality.
necessarily.
He's
Yeah.
got the same personality.
Yeah.
He's just fighting for a different cause.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. You're
No,
yeah.
I picked
He
up on
is.
that too.
He's always
I
yeah.
did pick up on that too. Like
Yeah.
it's similar personality, but fighting for a different
Oh
cause.
yeah, 100%. He's still kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't necessarily want to have dinner with Paul,
Good now instead
right,
of-
exactly, yes. But he is as strident and as adamant and yet this next verse we start to see, you start to see a little bit of Paul's heart here. So while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, so he's waiting for them, he was deeply distressed. What does everybody else's translation say? This is deeply.
Greatly distressed. in everything.
Greatly
I'd say
distressed.
His spirit was stirred in him.
Spirit was stirred in him. I kind of like that. So, anybody else have something?
His spirit was
This one
stirred.
says provoked within him.
Oh, provoked with him.
Strong,
Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah. So it's really this thing. And he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. I don't necessarily like the way this says because I don't think it misses the point. I think it doesn't get to the point of what actually is happening, or what I think is actually happening. So there you go. Because I think what's going on here is really Paul's heart's breaking. So he sees this city. He's not mad at people for worshiping idols because they don't know anything but idols. Like, how do they not? Like, he's not mad about the idolatry. He doesn't like it. Obviously, he's trying to rescue people out of it. But it's like, but he's not. He's aggrieved. He's like, he walks into this place that is fully taken over by idol worship. We're talking about, full on sex cults everywhere, full on blood sacrifices,
witchcraft.
all of that, like spell casting everywhere. I mean, all of that stuff that we associate with the pagan world, which has kind of largely been glossed over, but it is and he just sees all these people just enslaved to this, and they're trapped by these, quite literally, by these evil spirits.
By this time, is this when Athens has been conquered by Macedonia?
Yeah. I think
There's a difference. This is
Yeah.
no longer the
Yes.
thinking Athens. This is the conquered Athens.
Exactly. We were
His
just
turn.
we were just talking about that before you came in. I was wishing you were here because you could set us straight on it. But this is really not Roman Athens either. Like the Romans are, again, they have a lot to do with it. But he's really beyond the pale now. Like he's in many ways he's kind of he's into full on pagan country, or use the cowboy term. He's in Indian country.
The Macedonian.
Yeah, right, but at least some of that is still Roman. This is now like really, so he's kind of on the verge.
You might think though, in places like Athens, because even after Sparta won the Peloponnesian War, and Sparta part of won the Peloponnesian War, Athens was still the cultural
It's way, yeah.
crown
Yeah.
of Greece. And so, you might expect, as Macedonians come down, it still is that place.
100%, and probably more so, because of the fact that the Romans are so enamored with the Athenians.
Yes.
They're so enamored with the Athenian
And
philosophies
yeah.
and all this sort of. I mean, you have the great Stoic. The great Stoics are not. The Stoic philosophy comes out of Greece, but all the great Stoics are Roman. Like Marcus Aurelius, the greatest Stoic of all time. I mean, he's a Roman. So you get these Athens, regardless of who's in charge, is kind of on the ascendant in terms of people, its influence, and so it's kind of a big deal kind of thing,
Could it have been that Timothy and Silas weren't actually strong enough to go to Athens, that Peter needed to create the beginning before they got there?
I think it's I
But
actually
they weren't as evolved in their
Yeah.
religions as him.
I mean that's an interesting idea. I think Silas and Timothy go to the mat all the time. So
Yeah.
the fact that they wouldn't now would be that would be weird. And Paul doesn't have a lot of patience with that, as we saw in
Yeah,
John
that's
Mark.
true.
So I think it's really about the idea that that somebody has to tell the church how to be the church.
That's true.
This is a new thing, and like, how do we do this? And so somebody has to be there to kind of help them in this
That's
idea
true.
of
That's
how do we follow this Jesus guy? Like, we want to be followers of Jesus.
Paul
It's
was a confident scholar too.
Right.
That maybe that puts him
Yeah.
the lead.
Yeah.
Because he's a confident, true scholar.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of why people listen to his arguments.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so convincing.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, you're right, but I think the biggest thing is he's got to, like, I think it's just the fact that he's known and he's on his face is on the poster at the post office wall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's on the most wanted list, and they got to get him out of town, and that's why they, like, you have that little skullduggery in verse 15, like they shuffled him out of town, and so it's really. And Silas and Timothy, I think, are really being brave and staying,
They
right?
are.
Versus.
They were doing valid work. I just
Yeah.
meant maybe
Yeah.
Paul needed to set things up for him. It's all.
Yeah, it could be. It could be, but I think I mean, to me, the text leads more in the sense of, like, they just had to get Paul out of town before he got killed. So.
What's interesting though, when you were asking about what different people's Bibles, what words were used, right? In some of it sounded like they're depressed. He was
Right.
depressed. But in mine, like I said, the Spirit restored in him. And then as I read the rest of it, it sounds like he's energized.
Oh yeah.
And he's really
Right.
up to these debates, and he's really excited by, what they say next. For you bring strange things to our ears. We would not know what these things mean. And so it's like, I don't hear that he's depressed.
Mhm.
I hear that
No,
he's
yeah.
energized and up for
Yeah.
it, and let's
Yeah.
engage here.
Right. So this is, I mean, we got to remember Paul's worldview. I mean, he says this, he doesn't say this in Acts, but he says this in other books. He says that, we in the modern context we believe, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and is the real God, and all these other gods are kind of make-believe things, like the things that people made up to get through the day. And so Paul actually does not believe that. Paul says these are demons, that all these other pagan traditions are demons that are trying to extract from the people their power, their influence, their love, their goodness, to nourish their own selves, like demons do. Like they're trying to feed off of the people. And so he walks into town and he sees this basically this demon feast happening on the city of Athens, on the city of Athens, and he is just, the spirit is stirred. He is distressed. He's like, oh my God, like these people need to be rescued. Like he really does have a heart of a pastor in that sense of he really, his heart breaks for these people. That's my kind of read of it. And so because we really you can't overstate how much he's saying. He's not just saying these are he's going to go have this series of intellectual debates with the philosophers of Athens. No, he really understands these are demonic ideas, and these are demonic forces that he is in the process of trying to rescue people from. The building is on fire, and the fire is trying to consume people, and he's trying to pull people out of the fire. Like he really sees in that he sees himself, I think, in that way, much more than just a. So anyway, so he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day. So that term marketplace is really kind of a misnomer. Yes, you could go down there and you could get some fruity pebbles, but it was really the city center. Like if you've ever been to ancient city centers, there's most of them everybody has a different name, a piazza, a plaza, whatever, but they all have these big centers, and that was the place that everything kind of happened.
That's where the original philosophers.
Exactly, and that's what, and so the philosophers would be set up down there to talk about things. In fact, even in the ancient world, you would have, that's kind of where court cases would be heard. Like there would be, you'd have the judge by the gate, and you'd come up to the judge and say, hey, that guy stole my pencil. And it's like, well, it's like, did you steal his pencil? And like they would work out court cases right there on the fly. Like it was where all of civic life happened. So you could call it kind of the civic center if you want. But so he went down there every day. And every day with those who happened to be there. And also some Epicureans and some Stoics philosophers debated with him. Because this is what Athenians do for a good time. And some said, "What I like this translation. What does this pretentious babbler want to say?" That they're just, not only do they not get it, but they're like, what is this guy talking about? But it gives you a really good example about how far afield Paul is now. Like nobody said that yet. Like what is this guy? Nobody in 17 chapters has yet said, I don't know what he's talking about. Like they've all had at least enough context with either the Hebrew world or something that Paul, who is now pretty skilled at this argument, everywhere he goes, somebody comes over. Like he's pretty skilled at making this case at this point, and they're like, "What is this pretentious babbler talking? What is this guy talking about?" Like they,
And this is across the Aegean Sea, from the area where
right.
Judaism and Christianity.
Exactly.
Now you've gone into a whole new realm.
That's right. We are beyond. We are beyond the ice wall, okay? Like for my Game of Thrones fans. So the Epicureans and the Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some says, "Who does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." This was because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So, all right, he's talking about some god somewhere, about something, and so they took him and they brought him to the Areopagus, and they asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting?" And it sounds rather strange to us, so that we would like to know what it means. Now the Athenians, and again, this is very common kind of pagan idea of, because if you have 100 gods, it's easy to add 101. You know what I mean? So whenever they would encounter new people, it would always be it's the god of the oil paintings. Oh, it's the god of the whatever. They can always add another one. So there's this way in which all right, tell us about this guy. Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling and hearing stories, hearing something new. And so this was not only that, but it's kind of a novelty. And then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely spiritual you are in every way." Now this says spiritual, it's really religious.
Mine says religious.
Yeah, it should say religious.
Mine
Like,
says too superstitious.
yeah. So that's somebody with an extra grunt. Like, yeah.
There's like a tone in
There,
it.
yeah, somebody's got a tone. Somebody needed a Snickers bar when they were there. Like, yeah, because that's a little bit of a, like, I know what it's supposed to mean. So, you know,
What kind of Bible Christine
and
has?
you know, and it's and the thing is that does kind of betray the intent of what Paul was saying, because he's really working on flattering the Athenians, and he means it, and I don't think he's being disingenuous, because he's saying look at how, you know, engaged in the spiritual world you all are. Like, there are temples everywhere. You are engaged, you know, you are talking about philosophy. You are talking about these other things. I heard a modern theologian talking about this. He says, you know, in some ways Paul had it easier than modern evangelists do, because at least everywhere Paul went in the ancient world, everybody understood there was a spiritual world, and everybody understood the validity of the spiritual world.
100%.
Nobody
Yeah.
said, "Oh, you're just a bag of protoplasm with an urge to procreate, and when the light goes out, that's it." There was that. Nobody thought that. No one thought that. You know, and so from starting from, you know, and that the way that rationality, kind of that hyper modern, hyper material rationality has a way of walling the soul off. Like, it really does. It has a way of walling off, like, well, I just won't think about the things I don't want to think about. You know, like, you can really live in that, in a denial kind of framework of that. Like, you know,
I see Paul really displaying his brilliance again.
yep, I agree.
If you read on, and Paul, he starts off by complimenting them.
I was just supposed to say that.
And-
Yeah,
but
before
then
he
he
leaves
goes
the
on,
room, before he
and
even
he's-
tells them.
He's observed something, and so he's like kind of like saving it.
Yep.
And as he taught us, so he comments inside. He said, "For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription: to an unknown God." And now he comes up with the killer. Now, what you worship is something unknown. I'm going to proclaim to you. So he says, "You already recognize there's something
Right.
out there. I'm telling you now,
Right.
this is what it is."
Yep.
Boom. So that
So this is- yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, and this is very much Paul's kind of, the thing is this is what makes this a big deal. And we were saying, like, why is this a big deal? What makes it a big deal is this is the same kind of rhetorical way that Paul goes in with into the synagogues, except with a different worldview. So he normally goes, if you remember how he would go into the synagogues, he would say, you know, we are all children of Abraham, and we remember Abraham, and we remember and then Moses, and he'd go through the whole thing, and then he said, and now there's Jesus. You know, he goes through this whole, he goes through the whole litany of what he's doing the same thing, except what he's doing it now with is the pagan worldview. Is because what you have laying out here is that he's saying, I found among you an altar in the inscription unknown. What therefore you worship an unknown, I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands. Now this, for the philosophers, this is a huge deal. Because the philosophers saw the temples and the temple worship as kind of like, they didn't say it was invalid, but they saw it as kind of Mickey Mouse. They saw temple worship as like, because what the philosophers, particularly, you know, the ones that mentioned here, the Epicureans and the Stoics, there's a creation, and there's an order to that creation, and so there must be a creator. And that then there's this all of the other gods and all that sort of stuff that are in there, and you can worship those if you want to, but they're really, you know, they're really like, that's AAA ball. We're gonna play. We're in the majors, and when we talk about majors, what we talk about are first principles. We talk about creators, and Paul gets. I mean, this is Paul. You're right. You're absolutely right. This is Paul's brilliance, but it's also, I think, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Is that he makes this case and says, I know you're all very religious, you're all very spiritual, you get what goes on at the temples, but you also get that the Lord of heaven and earth does not live in shrines made by human hands. So he's going beyond the idolatry. Like, remember, idolatry, you make you carve a thing, and then the god enters the idol, and then you have the ability to, now it has a body, and now you can interact with it. And so he says, he's not saying that mechanism isn't true. He's saying that's not the important one. And that's what, and Paul, and so now he's got all of the philosophers nodding along with him. So he's already got them nodding, and he's only a little ways in. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives all mortals life and breath in all things. Again, this is first principle stuff. This is high level Greek. Greek creation story, like Greek philosophy. And then from one ancestor, he made all peoples to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places in which they would live. What is he saying there? What is that? Does that sound like anything in the Bible?
A little bit Adam to me.
What's that? Where?
Adam.
Okay, getting close. But what happens when the allotted? It's subtle. So the allotted. One ancestor, he made all peoples to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted them times for their existence and boundaries in their place. Where would their boundaries in their place and times of existence played out?
Was it Genesis?
You're getting close.
Babylon. Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel. Yes, the Tower of Babel. Give that girl a cookie. Yeah.
No, I already have.
Yeah. So, and we're gonna end with. I know we're at time. Do you want to keep going, or you want to we can put a pin in it with this? But I can wrap this up, and we can go. Or do you want to finish it?
What do you have to say?
Yeah,
Too much. I always have. Yeah. Let me make this point, and then we'll come back to it, and we'll start out with the next week because I'm curious too, because I actually do have homework for you, and kind of what you have to think about. So from one ancestor, he made all peoples inhabit. So he has now linked the pagan ancient worldview with the Hebrew worldview, because he said, and we both have this idea of the Tower of Babel, and that's what Jesus is coming into the world to heal. Is that yes, we're these different tribes, but we are all adopted sons and daughters of the Most High. That's where he's going to go with this, and this is so. It's really it's very brilliant, and it's the inflection point of the whole evangelism of the pagan world. Like this, we had Cornelius, but Cornelius gets called on his own, right? Like Peter doesn't evangelize Cornelius. Cornelius shows up and says, you got to deal with me, and even all the other pagans that end up coming. But here, this is the first foray into the full-on pagan world. Like there's no backstop. There's no. This is full-on, and this is the high country of it. This is Athens, where this is going to Harvard Yard and picking a fight with a philosopher. This is the high country, and the argument holds up. Not only the argument holds up, but the worldview holds up. You know what I mean? It actually and I say it makes sense, but that's not even enough. Like it resonates with them. You know what I mean? It's like they're still nodding along with him. And so, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of their places that they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps fumble about for him and find him. And that word fumble about is actually, I think it's better translated grope, like you're groping in the dark. And that's kind of the world, and that's the post, that's the post Tower of Babel world. And though indeed he's not far from each one another, for in him we live and move and have our being. as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. That quote is a hymn to Zeus. That's how crafty Paul is. He quotes a hymn to Zeus. So he's saying, like, yes, I'm a Hebrew. I got a funny hat. Like, none of you, like, I'm a Pharisee. None of this, and yet I come. He's strange upon strange upon strange, and yet he's able to completely plug into their worldview, completely bring it into this, and now bring it right down to quoting their own scripture, their own hymns, and saying, and understanding. And we'll pick it up with verse 29, but it's this sense. But this is where it gets really good. Since we are God's offspring. And that's where it all changes. We are God's offspring.
You gotta wonder, is Paul that smart or is that the Holy Spirit?
Well, exactly. It's got to be the Holy Spirit. Like, I mean, both can be true, but you know what I mean. But like, this is so. I mean, you're threading the keyhole from here. You know what I mean? Like, you're just like It is such a beautiful piece of, not just a piece of rhetoric, but just piece of truth. It's like it's the way in which, and it is really through this that the gospel really takes light and takes fire in the world and really starts to touch lives. Like, and again, remember where and this is the thing to remember where he started. He starts with his heart broken for these people because they're enslaved to all of this evil and all of this, they're owned by the passions, they're owned by everything, and he comes in and he bringing this good news to them. So so we'll pick it up in verse 29, and
What's our homework?
what's that? So the homework. Does everybody want homework? I have to make some more. I have to make some more copies if everybody wants homework. But so at the end of this chapter, so you can read 18. We won't be too much longer because we'll be. There's a couple of points I want to make before we get out of 17. But 17 ends with Dionysius the Areopagite, and so this is a little article on Dionysius the Areopagite because we always hear these names, like we hear Lydia, we hear these, and then we don't know anything about them, and it's like, and this is a really great setup for next week is to read about, because he's actually one of probably when it comes to Christian cosmology, like the organization of how is the spiritual world organized, he's probably the first and the greatest. Like the idea of angels and archangels, like he's the guy that codifies that within Christianity. He's a deeply mystical character, and it's only 3 pages. It's not a lot. Dionysius the
You want me to
Areopagite.
take a picture with my phone so somebody else can have it?
Yeah, if you want, I can send you a link. I can just send you the link. Yeah. So whoever wants it, yeah. So I've got 4 copies. Anybody who wants them, you're welcome to have a copy. And if
Are you going to be here next week?
I'll be here. No, I'll be here next week. Yeah.
Take this one, I'm gonna get the.
Yeah. No, we fly out Friday, and we fly out Friday. Shut that woman off. We fly out Friday. We're back in late Sunday night, and so I'll be here for Bible study next week. You want to see?
Oh, you're not
Ryan.
going to be here for church.
Won't be here for church, but I'll be here for you. Yeah, so it's Parents' Weekend. Yeah, it's Parents' Weekend. Yeah, so yeah, they're very good at timing this because Chris is just starting to melt down. It's it's got her to this next.
Right, you're not gonna make it a Thanksgiving.